Okay, so at this stage, I'm going to show you how to file down the sides, the edges of the metal. Now, to start with, you're going to need a needle file, although you can use a regular flat file, a bigger flat file if it's a bigger section that you're filing down. The needle file is just useful for smaller sections and getting into little gaps. So you can choose whichever file is most suitable for your design. I'm going to use a 50 grit sandpaper, which is really rough, little chunky bits of sand on it, which will be used to get rid of the really rough sections after you've filed it. Then I'm going to use a 100 grit sandpaper, which is like a medium rough, still quite chunky piece of sandpaper, but it's a little bit smoother, and it'll bring down the scratches even more from the rough. So you'll have the rough sandpaper, which will still leave quite a big chunky scratches on. I'm going to use the 100 grit sandpaper, and then the 150 grit sandpaper, which is much smoother sandpaper. And if you've got anything higher, like a 200 or a 300 wet and dry paper, then you can obviously smooth down even further. But at least 3 different types, a rough, a medium, and a smooth will be useful. And then a bit of wire wool will help smooth this out afterwards as well. Now, ideally, these would be emery cloth instead of sandpaper. Emery cloth is a bit more useful because it just protects your fingers a bit more instead of the metal slicing potentially through the paper. An emery cloth will protect you a little bit more from the cloth instead of the paper on the back. Will protect your fingers better from any rough bits of metal. But this is a fairly soft metal, and it doesn't seem to make too much difference. And especially if I wrap the sandpaper around a file, I do find that it works just as well. Now, first off, I'm going to reposition the engineer's vise into a more useful position. So you can just twist it at 90 degrees and then reclamp it down. Make sure it's nice and clamped so it doesn't move around. Now, I'm then going to position the key ring. Let's rewind it a little bit just so you can see that. So you can see it position it so it's edge on, so I can see the edge clearly, ready for filing it down. Make sure it's clamped up nice and tight. You can protect the metal. If you're worried about the metal scratching, then 2 little pieces of wood on either side, scrap pieces of wood on either side, will protect the metal better and make sure it doesn't scratch it. Because it's already messy on this face and on the back anyway, I'm not too fussed at the minute. And I'm going to be filing that down anyway, so I'm not too worried about the metal engineer's vise scratching the key ring at the moment, as long as it's careful. Okay, so there's 2 different filing techniques. This one's called cross filing. You put your hand on one side, hand on the other, and you go across the metal at 45 degrees, back and forth across it, and up and down at the same time. So you can see, you go across it. So work on one section at a time, no more than about 4 or 5 centimeters. Should be fine. So up and down at 45 degrees across the metal. Now this removes the larger sections, any really rough sections with the cross filing technique. So it's the first one to use because it removes the roughest sections of the metal. I'm then going to do what's called the draw filing technique, where you put it at 90 degrees across and you hold it in both hands and you go back and forth, and that just smooths it out a little bit. So it smooths it across. So just back and forth at 90 degrees, and it just helps to level it a little bit more. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is I'm taking the 50. I do know it says 93 on the back of there, but it's the numbers don't seem to correlate with the texture, so I think it's around about 50. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the file around the sandpaper around the file. I'm going to do draw filing technique, so you can see. And what you'll find is with the sandpaper, is the sand comes off very quickly, so you need to keep rotating the sandpaper to make sure that you are actually sanding with sandpaper and not just paper. Okay, so you do need to keep rotating it until you get a fresh piece. Okay. The benefit of emery cloth would be it probably would stay on a bit better as well than the paper, but it does job. Then I moved on to the 100 and repeat the same process back and forth. Draw filing technique with the 100, and hopefully each time I'm making the scratches smaller and smaller. And again, rotate the sandpaper and use the whole across the whole section, not just the middle of the sandpaper. Try and use it all. So you can see I'm moving back and forth and across to make sure that I'm using all of the sandpaper, and I'm also rotating the sandpaper around. Now move on to the 150 and repeat. Again, now the scratches should be very small. The idea being that you're trying to get rid of all scratches, so there is no scratches anymore on it at all. Okay. So you're making the scratches so small that you can't see them anymore. And then the wire wool. Well, the wire wool should just really shine it up. It basically just cleans the surface of the metal and gives it a really nice shiny finish. Really useful to get rid of any marks. But the wire wool won't work very well unless you go through the stages of the sandpaper at all times. And you should be able to see a nice shiny finish, ready for then the next stage. Okay, thank you for watching.